Yeah, hello and welcome to our lecture series, Climate Protection. First, some organizational issues. As mentioned last time, please upload both the summary of the lectures and the literature, and additionally to the exam procedure I sent in the previous email. So I hope it's clear because some of the students ask how to do the exam. Yeah, and today we have a special guest, Margreth Keiler from the Institute of Geography of the University of Innsbruck and APCC co-chair. Margreth Keiler has been a researcher in the Modular Lab for Natural Hazards on the Eschger Center for Climate Change Research at the University of Bern since 2014 and has also been co-director of the lab since 2016. In addition to her professorship at the Institute of Geography, Margreth Keiler is also the new director of the Institute of Interdisciplinary Mountain Research of the Austrian Academy of Sciences in Innsbruck. So, and today she will talk about the drafting process of the second Austrian assessment report on climate change. Welcome, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Rainer, for the welcome, and thank you for the people coming for this nice weather to the lectures and also to the online people. Today I'm presenting a project, a huge project where we have a lot of people involved, and I present today something what we put together in our assessment report coordination team. I will introduce this afterwards. So just that all the people working on this project, that they get the credit, so it's not the work of my own part in this case. So we have a project, as you see in the title, that's from the assessment report on climate change in Austria. We call it AAR2 in a short name. And I want to give you today a little bit of background idea how we do assessment. And I will also explain a little bit the different institutions which are involved in that, and that you get a background what we as scientists try to do to get more information here on climate change and what's the possibility for Austria, how direct and what is the action what we can set. No. No. Okay. So there are different kind of assessment reports on climate change. And my question to you is, what do you know already about it? There are some notes. There seems not a lot of information, but I think most of you heard already from the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. And this Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change is a body of the United Nations, and it collects or brings together a lot of different scientists that work to climate change. And the current products or the last products are the synthesis report on climate change, which was published this year, March. And it's the 6th report in this case. So we had already different ones. And what you see also, the synthesis report is part of all these products you see on the slide. So we have working groups, working group 1, working group 2 and 3 with different topics in focus for this part. And we had also some special reports on ocean cryosphere and a changing climate, but also here you see on methods for short-lived climate forces for global warming of 1.50 degree or climate change and land. So this is in this synthesis report, we try to get all the information together. And I will show you also how the APCC is developing this idea and the assessment. And here I brought you some of the key results. I think you're aware of these key messages. That's now from the working group 1. The first one, and they say human influence has warmed the climate at the rate that is unprecedented in the at least in the last 2,000 years. And you see also the reports here, 2,000 years here, the reference period between 1815 and 2020. And you see here the reconstructed temperature, and the black line is the observed one, where we have observed data. This is from geo-archives, where we could reconstruct it. The baseline is the 0 degree, this is the average here, or the 0 is here the average in this reference period. And you see there was a temperature above, but also below, and then this strong increase that we have in the last 170 years included here, what we also have documented. And what you see on the right side here, that's this reference period on the scale here. And you see also the change of the temperature. And once when we model this only with natural forces, so like the orbit information, the volcanic, the solar ones, so that would be the temperature change in this case. And what we see here with the brown line and also the dark line, the observed one, is the simulated human and natural impact. So what we can see from this graph that exactly we human drive the climate change in this case. So that is one of the result of the APCC. That means on a global level. Also that another key message is that every ton of CO2 emission adds to global warming. And you see it also in this graph. We see here the temperature, we see the number or the gigatons of CO2, and we see here down in the lower part how much CO2 we will contribute in the future depending on which scenario. If we manage to reduce the human-produced CO2 emission or not. And that's the different kind of scenario. What you see here, the last one is business as usual. We do nothing and we grow in this case. And then you can see what does it mean in this part that we have an increase here of 2.53 degrees in this case. You see the range of the models and you see the median is always the black line for the different scenarios. So that's results of this working group 1 what's contributed, and now I will brought also some new results of the synthesis report. They are really in the last month what you see, and what we see here, it's not just we look at temperature, CO2, how it changed, but we look at the impact. What does it mean for our society? And you see here that we have a substantial impact, related loss and damages, and you can see it here for water and food production, for health, well-being, city settlement, and for biodiversity and ecosystems. And if you have this red point, you have adverse impacts. In this case, on a global level, if you have the green and the red one, there could be also positive impacts in some regions in different areas. So it's depending if we have this, or when we have the gray point, we have climate-driven change observed, no global assessment of impact directions. So there we have no information in this case, so we couldn't make see if it's adverse or a positive impact. And each of this information, what you have here, you have this confidence level. So it means high or very high confidence if you have the 3 points. That means that we have a lot of studies in this case. They show the same directions and they have same results. In the case, if you have low confidence, either we have few studies with low evidence, or we have also information that go in opposite directions, and it's not really clear if there is a trend or not. And that's done for all the assessments reports. And here, that's one graph, I will put it now in 3 parts, is what's the climate impact conditions. And what you can see, this observed physical climate change to human influence. We have medium confidence here in the increase in agriculture and ecological droughts. In wildfires, if you look to Canada at the moment, they have a lot of problems, but also in other regions, and increased in compound flooding. But there is likely that we have an increase in heavy precipitation. It's very likely glacial retreat, global sea level rise, and virtual certain we have the increase of the hot extremes and the upper ocean acidifications. So, and the third part of this means, what does it mean for us in the case of which kind of temperature we will have? And you see it will get hotter in the different world, depends on the choice now and in the near term. So which climate actions we will take to protect the climate. And it's really interesting because that's a figure from the summary for policymakers. So it should be for people that are not expert in this case, but they could understand. And that's why you have this different kind of colors, where you see that's the temperature, and we always have the reference period 1850 to 19 level here. 0 means it would be the same temperature, and if it's really this dark purple one, then we have 43 more than in this reference period. And you see that's our observed period, what we have there. And they say when you're born in 2020, you can be born. What does it mean for you when you're 70 years old in 2090? And here it depends on the different kind of scenario, what we have seen before, when we have here a low increase and very low and low increase in CO2, and also then for the warming part, or if we have the scenario with business as usual, then we have here really this 4-degree level in this case. And you see this person, depending on which scenario will happen, which kind of higher temperature this person has to deal when it's getting 70 years old. If you compare this with a person down here, which currently is 70 years old, you see a huge difference in this case. But that's always global levels here decided. And I brought also one where it's not in the summary for policymakers, but it's in the report, in the chapter 2, where you see here also we had the global level here. We have seen this before, but you have then the different continents and regions. And you see then also that we have different effects and also different kind of confidence in this area. So it means in the global assessment, we now look also more in different regions, what would be the effect in this case. And I brought you also one figure from this case, from the special report on ocean and cryosphere. And as you heard, I'm working in mountain area, so I choose the mountain area in this case. And what can you see here in the high mountain area? How climate change will change the impact and also the risk. In this figure on the left, you see these gray circles. That is the situation in different ones today. And you see this with the red, what would be in the future. So what we can see here, unstable slopes and landslides. We had this just in the news in the last days, and a lot of my colleagues are now really working in it, to monitor it, to see, to realize, or to really make research what happened. Can we transfer this knowledge also to different ones? So a lot of my colleagues are now very ambitious to coordinate also in the university, but also with colleagues from other sides in the field, that we can make here a common research activity for better understanding, and also to say how often this will happen in the future, in which area in the Alps. And you see that was already indicated, so not surprising for us. The only surprise is when it happens and where it happens. But you see also there is for the floods that we will have more and larger glacial lakes, but also floods events in this case. For the snow avalanche, it means depending, do we have enough snow? If we don't have the snow, we don't have avalanches. In higher area, we will have wetter snow avalanches and also perhaps more frequent one in this case, but depending on the region. And if you see the social and the infrastructure system, there in this circle, you see a lot more buildings and a lot more infrastructure in this case, and that has a huge impact on risk because there would be more elements at risk, so more buildings, more infrastructure, more people who are endangered by this process who will change in the future. And you see it is also in this graph where we have the disaster risk, the hazard, the vulnerability, and the exposure. And you see here the increase of risk with the red arrow and the decrease with the gray circle and white arrow going down. And then it's corresponding to these colors here in this risk propeller. And you see we have an hazard, an increase, but also decrease. But if you look for the red signs where we have the increase is a lot for exposure and vulnerability. And that means also the social system. We are changing very fast in this case, having then additional hazards, so that also increases our risk. So that's results of this report on an international perspective. But how the scientists came to these results and how they developed the assessment report. I think most of the people don't know how it is and what's the problem, and that's what I want to explain here a little bit. There's a really nice graph from Working Group 1 from the recent assessment report, and there are a lot of people doing research on climate. You see here for Working Group 1, which is the physical base, look at the atmosphere, try to reconstruct. We have instruments, we have process understanding, we develop different kind of models, and we use climate archives to produce different studies. In this case, we learn about CO2, and these are all get published in a journal with a pre-review. So other colleagues are checking if this is correct, if it's understandable what they do, and if it's a high quality research. And then it's get published. That's the usual part how we do it. For the assessments report then, we see we have first a framing to think what's the idea. You say different kind of reports. We have to define the reference period that everyone is looking at the same time, that we use the same one, because if this is shifted, you could get different results. Then we also look at the region. In this case, for these results were on a global level, and we have to agree on an uncertainty language. What does it mean? How do we write it? And how do we evaluate confidence in this case? And then you see, in this case, they evaluated more than 14,000 publications. There were 234 volunteer authors. They organized this in 13 chapters, and you see here the different chapters and ideas what they did in these forms. We have also a technical support unit, and we have the a bureau supporting also the part, but mainly it's done by researchers during their daily work. So there is not additional pay or something or project in the behind, but it's an organization where people want to volunteer to work together. And then you see that's a structure what you will find afterwards also for us in Austria, that you develop a first order draft, that you think about the structure. And then this goes in a review. You see this here within a global part where you get feedback in this case. And then you have the second order where you then develop a more clear structure and idea. And you have the full report, a technical summary, the summary for policymakers where I took the figures You also document the frequent asked questions, and in this case, they also develop an interactive atlas. And you see, for the first order draft, they got more than 23,000 comments. For the second order draft, it was even more than 50,000. And then in the last one, it was again 3,100. And you see, there were 1,891 individual reviewer giving feedback to different parts of this report. So it's a really global effort where the people work together, and also 47 governments included this. And in this, for the APCC, for all the reports, what they have a approval plenary where the scientists discuss this with government and policy makers to see that they can make an agreement. If they have this agreement, then you have this approval. So that's the process, and then it's get published. So that's the report, and you have seen before, perhaps in the first part, but also just look at APCC. You can download all these reports in different parts. You can download also the slides. So the slides were also taken from this website there. And then you see that's the product, how many publications we have, how huge they are, like the summary for policymakers is 30 pages, and the overall report has 2,500 pages. So in the 30 pages, you take the essential key message for the policymakers. And when you want to learn and understand much more, you go to the technical summary. If this is not enough, you go to the detailed report in this case, and they also produce like fact sheets in this part. So that's the process of the APCC, how you get this assessment and this agreement on a global level. So what do we do in Austria in this case to climate change? We have an APCC, so an Austrian panel of climate change, based on the same idea like we had on an international level. And this was established by the Climate Change Center Austria, what you see the website here. And you see on the left side also the different projects, what they do. And what the idea is to bring the researchers working on climate change together and compile exactly also reports for Austria in this case. And there are different reports we had already. So nearly 10 years ago, there was the first Austrian assessment report on climate change. That was also 3-year work to get this published. And then you see special reports on health, demography, and climate change, a special report on tourism and climate change, on land use, land management, or all climate-friendly living. And the last one now here is again where we compile all the different topics now again in assessment report for Austria. To give you an idea about the last one, overall assessment report, you see here the page. It's a really thick book. If you want to see it, you can also download it on the web page of I just showed you before. And what you see, they had 3 volumes. And one volume was on the climate, what changed since in the past, but also what's going on for the future. We had another volume where we looked at the impacts on effect on the environment and the society. And then there was also the third one where they said which kind of mitigation and adaptation measures do we have. It was a very important step to do, but it was very sectoral. So you can put here also different discipline on this case. And people from the climate change assessment or the APCC and the CCCA, they started to scope and say we want to have another report, an updated report, and they started to have a committee scoping who could lead this and who should be engaged in this case. And that's something where I come in. When I just changed from University Bern to Innsbruck, I was nominated with other colleagues that we should start this process. And this process started in April 2021 for us to do it, but there were already a lot of workshops in 2020 to say what should be the content, what could be included there, who should be engaged in this case, so that we are now on this stage, and I will show you afterwards, is already a more than 3-year process in this case. And what we did then, we prepared a project proposal to the Klimafonds, where you had a call for this assessment report, and we got this, and we have now the biggest project of the Klimafonds, where we organize this, and I will give you now some hints and parts what we are doing. So the objective, the overarching objective, is that we have the synthesis of the scientific knowledge about climate change, and to identify the response option and pathway for mitigation and adaptation to reach climate neutrality in Austria. We have regulations on different levels, on the EU level over Austria, where we want to adapt this, but we have to bring this together. And we had formulate different key questions. And what I think is interesting here, that these are key questions what you would find in the APCC in working group 1, 2, and 3. So they had different parts in this. We do this in one part. So that's one of the key messages. And when you say climate change related impacts in Austria, past, present, and future, is one of our key questions. We want to evaluate this. So which kind of extreme events we observed already, and which one we will have in the future due to climate change? Do we will reach system thresholds so that we have very different adverse impacts what we not experienced yet? So we want to find out if this is an important part or tipping points. But we also have to include in this case, when we look at the impacts, what is the exposure and the vulnerability? So what is the social, economic, and biophysical situation and conditions, and how they will change, so that we can interrelate and give this overall answers to the case. And what we have in this part, because Austria, we have a lot of mountains. You heard a lot that, especially in the mountains, we observe a very fast increase of temperature. It's higher than when we compare with whole Europe. That it's like a more vulnerable, sensible area. We check this, if this is really the case, and how resilient are our mountain regions in this case. And the case is here, how to build a climate resilient society to successfully adapt and to cope with the impact. So we look also which kind of potential we have to adapt, but what are the limitations? Is there a limitation where we can't really adapt anymore? So we want to include this as well, and the same is also when we look at the mitigation side. What you see on the right-hand side is from the working group 2, from the recent part, regional burning embers, where you see the global surface temperature changes here. And then you have different topic here is food production and crops, fishery, and livestock in Africa. If you go down here, the last two ones are for Europe on coastal flooding or heat stress, mortality and mobility for people in Europe. And then you see if you get this part, then you have a high risk, there is lower risk. And with the dots, we learned already before, that's the confidence level. So how we can include this, and that's for different areas. You see also here water security in the southeastern part of Europe. That's already when we exceeded here the 1.5 degree, we go in a more high risk institution. So we try to get similar or adapted information like this also for Austria. We are not clear if we can really reach that, because it depends, do we have the study and the information in this case or not. Then the key question 2 is, in this case, how Austria can reach climate neutrality. Which possible pathway do we have? What have we to do that we can reach it? That's our aim. So we also show up the potential and the options how we can reduce CO2 and other emissions. Also, what's the contribution of the individual sector, the demand and the supply from the society? And what are the costs and potential for these mitigation measures? How much we have to invest? What's the potential? What's another added value in another sector when we do it? And what you see here on the right-hand side, it's from Working Group C. You have here different mitigation options. You see in energy, you see in buildings, in transport, in industry or others. And then you can see which one have a high potential really to reduce it and how much would it cost. And when you see the blue one, the costs are lower than the reference. So you see in wind and solar energy, we have a high potential to do it without a lot of costs, but we can do also in different use conversion forests or ecosystems we can work. And there are other ones where the effect would be not so huge, but also is its important contribution. But that's important that we know what's possible. And what we also ask us, what are the alternative strategy and pathways? So we think a kind of combinations for the mitigation, but also for the adaptation. What does it mean when we choose different ones, options, potentials, and what would be the result 2030, 2060 in this case? Then also we look for portfolio of measures to balance emissions, source and sinks. So it means, can we store CO2? What are potential sinks where we can do it to reduce it? We think about technical measures, but also very important lifestyles and behavioral change. So how we change mobility, which transport we use, how often we travel, also how much meat do we eat, what's the potential in all these cases considering the society and also the macroeconomic implication and distributional effects, so justice. So in this case, what does it mean? And then in the key question 3, you see we try to get synergy and trade-off with the sustainable development goals. You can look here, that's also a small part where you see we have the same different areas, lower part industry, transport, buildings, urban systems, agriculture in this case, and the energy supply. And then you have here on this one that's really small, you will not see it, the 17 sustainable development goals. And we have here this indication, are the synergies or trade-off for this, so that we combine climate change with the sustainable development goals in this case. And we try to do something similar here for Austria, what's done here on a global level. So we discuss here also the Austrian carbon budget in 2030 and 2040. Are we on track? That's a big question. What also our political decision makers will do in the future. What does it mean? And we also want to strengthen the response in different parts. So enabling condition, policy instruments. We have a lot of regulations. They are contradicting. We want to find them out and see that we mainstream them in direction of climate change. So, and to find out this, how we can contribute with finance, so how we distribute money, what are the institutional and governance requirements, how we have to adapt and change here, what are important market reforms, to what I said before, to remove the misaligned policies and the equality and redistributional methods, because there will be some people, they will lose something, they don't have their job anymore because it will not exist, but there are a lot of new options. And we want to see what we have to do that we find this. And we organize this now in a different way, so that we structure, and as you see here in the topic, we said to ourselves, we want to go beyond the previous structural assessment, what I showed you before, to do an interdisciplinary work, and to have this more holistic view on climate change literature in Austria, and also to think about the interlinkages. So we have a chapter 1, it's called Physical Manifestation and Climate Change in Austria. That was in the last assessment report, volume 1 and 2. We reduced from the last volume, we've squeezed this in one chapter. That means we have climate scientists, we have also biologists, we have hydrologists, we have from different fields where we look what's the impact of climate change in the different sphere in one chapter. So each chapter is already highly interdisciplinary, and the people have to find together because we talk in different languages. We use perhaps the same term, but we have a different concept and understanding of the term and what does it mean. So that's challenging for a lot of our scientists, but it's also a great opportunity because you have to work together with colleagues. You would never contact them because it's not in your specialized field. So that takes time. There's a lot of discussions, but that's important. That is true for all of the different chapters. So in the second chapter, we look the impact, but also the potential and limitations for mitigations. So emissions reduction and adaptation as mean for perhaps natural hazards or other things, what are adverse impacts due to climate change. And here it's included, you see, ecosystem services and health. That means we have agriculture, we have forestry, in there we have ecosystems, biodiversity is in case, and also the health sector is in this case, because it means also the food production. And what does it mean? But it means also like heat stress in the case, what does it mean for workers in the agriculture part? What is the effect to our forest due to the high temperature or less precipitation? In the chapter 3, we have the built environment and mobility. That means we have city planning, land use planning. We have everything what it's doing with building constructions and how we can reduce emissions, how we can really improve our buildings, that we need less heating and we don't need air conditioning when it's got very hot. So that's in part of this, but also the whole mobility and transport in this case. So it's on the road, it's also a rail part. When we do it, it's also for airplanes and how we produce it, how we move in this case. So that's different parts in this. And then we have other parts, what's part of our economy, industry, economy in general, labor market and energy supply. And again, it's always the potential for mitigation, adaptation, and also the limitation and the impact what we have in this sector. So that's the part where we look in this. And then you see this more orange chapters, that what we say are strongly interconnected with all the other chapters, where we look at sustainable service provision systems, where we look at governance, finance, and policy. In this case, we have this focus on mountain regions as a multidimensional focal area. And the last one would be then transformation pathway in the future. And what you see here in this graph is how they are related. So all our scientists working in this, our authors, have to talk to the others. And we have huge meetings where we come together, and which also allows to do it. And we try to provide a clear structure how the people can exchange, because you see there's arrow in all directions between all the chapters. So chapter 1 is providing information for all the other chapters to say what would be like a global warming situation with 2 degrees. When happen? Where can it happen? What does it mean then for heavy precipitation? What does it mean for snow in this case, or other indicators what they have? What would be the impact to our rivers or to the groundwater? They look, what does it mean for our botanical, for the fauna, for the flora in all different cases. So they provide all the information, but all the other chapters have to tell them which information they need, that they can assess what could be the impact in the future and where they assess the part. We have a lot of parts, we call it handshakes, when 2 chapters have to exchange and see who is working on which topic or which part of the topic they cover in which chapter. And we have other topics I will show you afterwards where we cover where all the chapters have to contribute. So we have to organize it that we have this exchange, and it's a good exchange. And how do we do it? I mentioned already different parts. So myself and I have 3 colleagues, we are the co-chairs of this assessment report. There we have also an APCC steering committee. They provide information, they give advice, they have experience with all the other special reports and provide us the part. Very closely related is the technical support unit, that these persons are paid by the project. And also what we have here, the chapter scientists. Vincent was here, he's one of our chapter scientists, he just left before. And that's the only person who has employment in the project. All other people do it when their work time or in their free time to work and contribute in this case. And then we have for each chapter coordinating these also, 3 of them. And together with them, we as co-chair selected the chapter authors in this case. So that's the coordinating lead authors, and then the chapter authors, they're writing really the part in this case. We have support from the Climate Change Center Austria for the stakeholder process and the review process. And we have additionally review editor, external, who have knowledge about them, who check on the review if the authors reply in a good scientific manner. And they report back also to the steering committee and indirectly to us. So that's the structure how we work. And you see here is policymaker and other stakeholders where we get also input in our case. You see here a little bit what's the task of each of these roles, of the different responsibility, what we have in this case. And I just want to go and introduce you a little bit our team or our core coordination team. So that's myself. I have 2 colleagues from the IASA in Luxembourg, Daniel Huppmann and Kevin Riai, which contributed, and Harald Rieder, he's from the BOKO or University of Natural Resource Science. He's meteorologist. He came from the technical part, but also had economic studies. And Daniel Huppmann is a modeler, in this case, strongly in climate change and mitigation, but also with a broad background in this case. And we closely work together with our technical support unit, where they support us that we have a strong contact to our chapters. And you see Kai has the main responsible to report a layout and 2 chapters. Maria is for the stakeholder process. Eva is our administration staff, because you will see we have a huge bunch of people. Monica is for the review management, and Jan is for the scientific support, mainly for our cross-cutting chapters. And you see that we have different levels. Currently, we only add contributing authors when we see in our chapters that a certain topic is missing. Then the lead authors can or invite people to say, look, we need especially here information for you. Can you assess this for us? So what's the team? You see here the contribution. We are overall 125 people working on that. That means we coordinate 125 scientists. We have them from different institutions. You see here the main institution. One is our university at Innsbruck, IASA, Uni Graz, BOKU, and the WU Vienna, so economics university. We have overall 31 contributing institutions, mainly in Austria, but we have also colleagues who know Austria very well, but they're in the US, in Germany, in Switzerland, in France, but they're also part of this part. We are happy that we have okay gender balance in this case between the overall team, the coordinating lead authors, and the lead authors. And you see here we have 4 co-chairs, 5 TSU members, 24 coordinating lead authors. That means for each chapter we have 3 persons in this case. Then in the per chapter we have up to 15 lead authors, and we have for each chapter a chapter scientist. That's a new graph we decided to show, that we have a lot of discipline included. It's very difficult to identify which is really the background of the people. So we see people from natural science. We have here a huge bunch. So it's not only climate scientists in this case. But you see we have a very different part in this part, and in the social we have a strong economic part, but that could be also that we couldn't really differentiate it in a clear manner. But we have also from legal part, from political science, psychologies, and sociology in this case. So very different parts where we try to work together. Very important is, and you have seen this for the APCC, also this review process. You see in the graph, we have a 0 order draft. We get then a feedback. Currently, we work on the 1st order draft. And then we get the final draft, where we have also feedback from our review editor, and get then hopefully for the summary for policy making. And we have also this stakeholder process. I explained already a little bit here about the roles. Very important is really the review editors, that they look that it's really high quality, the answer in these cases. And just that you inform, the 0 order draft had 303 pages. We have more than 50 internal, so that means authors from the other chapter looked at the not their chapter, but in another one, and also invited external reviewers. And we had already 898 review comments where they have already reported. And for the 1st order draft, it's open. Everyone can then register. So you can yourself register on the platform, and then you get the information and can give feedback and comments on it. And then the authors have to answer to each of these comments. So what we do additional to the scientific review, because we want that it will be then also implemented, and it's something for the public. It's not just a scientific part. We have a stakeholder process. You see here the scientific review, we follow the APCC procedure, and you see we have the zero audit draft. Here we had the first part. We are here. Our authors are working now on the first audit draft, and we will have another review phase until end of the year, from end October and end of the year, and then also for the final part. But we included also a science policy interface. We got additional financial resources to organize this and to implement this, that we can produce a co-ownership of these policymakers and stakeholders. What does it mean? That we include political decision makers on federal, regional, and local level. So we are very happy that we have very good contact and input engagement from like Tyrol, Vienna, Styria, and also other parts. They include here, and they're also transported to other colleagues on a lower level, to say to the municipalities in their states, but also that we include all federal states in this case. So we have now people involved, stakeholders. They also have the role as multiplicator to their parts. There will be also the Wirtschaftskammer, economic parts. We have industry, big industry from energy supply included here. We have also like Gewerkschaft, Working Council in this case included. We have included the Armutskonferenz, Poverty Conference. We have people included who worked in the Klimarat in this case. So we try to get really different people, and also NGOs included here, or a Friday for Futures is part of it. So we include really different groups and try to give them a feedback, explain what we do, and ask them what's your important questions, what we could consider. But we just consider if we have scientific literature to it. So otherwise we could say, okay, there's a gap. We don't have a research that we can answer the questions, but that would be important. So we try to build this really up in a co-design workshops, what we see, a co-creation workshop, and we try to make also, that's not clear yet, approval of the plenary. And that looks like this, that you get an idea. We have a core group. In this core group are our co-chairs and our external members who support, moderate this process. We have a steering board that would be like the people, what they say, are also multiplicators and give the feedback. And we have workshop for participation where we include a user group for a certain topic, where we would go also in this case in green financing. What's done in this case, what we can do in this part, and you see how this works. We have our core group meeting. We are included the gray point then in the steering board meeting, and they gave also feedback on our zero audit draft or the main results. And that's the whole process where you see we have a lot of workshops and meetings. You see here a round table. In this case, what's going on green financing in general, how we have to change financing system for climate change, what could be different parts. In this roundtable, our authors give input in this case, and we discuss this with a certain group of stakeholders, which are important in this case. The results go back to us as core group. We discuss this also with our steering board members, where we have stakeholders from the different political, but also for the civil part. And we decide also with them together what are topics for this roundtable, where we need more information in this case. and we have currently 2 planned, and we will define further topics as well. And in January 2024, we will have a huge co-creation workshop where we think about 40 to 60 stakeholders from different areas, where we work together with our lead authors and want to learn what's important for them, how do they understand our key messages, how we have to formulate them in a different way, what's really limitations in their sense, what's questions we never ask scientists, but it's very important so that we get this engagement, and we hope that there would be then also multiplicator and support this information. And then you see we have the different one, and we hope that everyone would agree to have this approval plenary. That's a little bit critical because between we will have elections, and we don't know if then the political situation is the same and they still get the support and they would work with us together. So that's also some challenges where we have to deal with. You see here the timeline, a very coarse line, what we see, what we as co-chairs and the TS2 is doing this general management to really get everything done. Then we have huge meetings. You see this lead also meetings here, 1, 2, 3. We plan already now for January, where we have our 125 authors together and where we can discuss this. In this case, we start already for drafting the SPM, that's the summary for policymakers. So we have to do this then really here in 24, but we start to drafting now this already in this case. And you see we have this organization with the review process, which is a huge effort because we have to organize that everyone who wants to comment can comment, and we invite also international experts in this case. And then the main work is done for all our authors, which they have to draft the different parts. Currently, they're working heavily on the first order draft because the submission deadline is the 1st of September in this case. What we have also, perhaps that you have a background why we have a huge amount of money and what we do. So we pay these meetings, and each chapter has also the possibility to organize their writing workshops where they meet together, they can write, they can discuss. Now a lot of things work online, but there's also a lot of time and meeting what we need really for this exchange. You see what we mentioned, currently the first order draft is in the main focus. So what are challenges doing that? That seems easygoing. Usually we get the questions why you need 3 years for this process or more than 3 years. Why you can't say it tomorrow, what is the result? So you see a lot of these discussions, and what also very important, assessment is not a review and it's not a research study. What we need is really the knowledge, the expertise of these people, that they can say how good is the evidence. Do we have 1 study? Do we have 10 studies with the same result, showing the same direction? Can we compare them because they use different methods, they use different assumptions? If we don't have studies here in Austria, can we transfer the results, the knowledge from perhaps Switzerland or Italy or Germany or other country and say, that's the same condition. We don't have a direct study, but due to our expertise, that would be the results for Austria. And we have clearly to say, this really evidence in here? Are they constricting, or do we have it together or not? And that's also more than a review, just putting all the information together. So that's challenging. If you had not have done this, so we have trainings for our authors as well in this case. What we decided is we have a cutoff date in December 2024. Everything what's published afterwards we can't consider because we would be too far in our process. So what we can do, If you have something, publish it now that we can include it. And what's very important, it's not just the work and the information of our authors, because they have to go beyond. And also if they have a different opinion on something, or don't have other opinion than the result of the other study is shown, they have to show this and say, okay, there are different opinions, and we evaluate this and assess this in this case, especially if this is this agreement. What we also are very important is that we want to write in a policy relevant way, but we want not to say our policymakers, that's the only way how you can do it. So we have to tell them what you can do, what's the options, what would be the consequences if you do it or if you don't do it. So that's very important that we don't do it, because if we do that, we wouldn't have a chance that they take it up and think about it and use it as a resource. Our idea is that it's a very good resource and they can use it afterwards, and they go back to it and can form their arguments based on our assessment report. So it's very important to do it. So we do also training on that, how to write it, what does it mean, and that's for some people very challenging. What's also a very important part of our assessment report is that we identify knowledge gaps. There are a lot of parts, and usually our authors say, we can't answer your question. There are no studies on this for Austria. We can't deduce it for Austria. We have it on a European level, but we have a global level. We have it for different regions or not. So we identify these gaps, and we have the contact to the Klimafonds and also to the Ministry for Climate Protections, that we can inform them and say, look, we identified already these research gaps. Can you include this in your next call, or think about to include it in the next call? And if we are fast, we can include it in the assessments report as well. And what we described, what we said, how certain or uncertain are the results, which kind of evidence we have, and then to assess the competence. And we use here also the APCC, how you can assess competence on uncertainties. You see on the right-hand side, it's a book. It's a whole book how to do it, and parts. And we just have here that we look at the agreement. Do the studies agree? Do they show in the same direction, show the same trend? And how good is the evidence, the type of the study we have, the amount, the quality, and the consistency of all the parts. And then you see there's the different part, and each of the IPCC statement I showed you before give this confidence level. And that's something what we will do as well. For each of our key message, we have to say low, high, or medium, or very high confidence in this case. And you see this here with the color. So we have to define, so we have a high confidence when we have a high agreement and robust evidence. When we have a low agreement but a robust evidence, then you see it's already a medium part, or there's low agreement and limited evidence, then that's a low confidence in this case. So that has to be done for all the parts what we do. Because we want to go on this interdisciplinary view of climate change, we had selected cross-cutting topics, and that's challenging because for each of the cross-cutting topics, we have to use the same approach and methods in each of the chapters that we can compare it. So that's also a huge effort to develop this and to organize it. So we have here the main cross-cutting topics are hazards and risks, cost and potential, because we want to compare how much cost and potential we do. That's really a challenge to identify this. How we can address the sustainable development goals, which kind of scenario database we are using. Interesting part is for the zero order draft, we had it like that. that most of the people in each of the sectors said, yeah, we are the second most CO2 emission producer, our sector. Is it mobility? Is it industry? And all of them said yes, it's the second most part in this case, because they use different database. So what we do is now that we provide this a database, and all the chapters have to reference this database that we are comparable. Otherwise, nobody would believe us when we have two second ones. Then we look also on carbon dioxide removal. How is this possible? What are the challenges? Which study do we have? We have a cross-cutting topic on health, because that's included in all the different chapters, and they have to contribute. So all contribute, and we have people, they're located in chapter 2, where you see it's also health. They coordinate this, but all the other chapters contribute as well. Then a huge topic also and challenges is the cost of inactions. What does it mean when we don't take any actions for climate protections or for adaptations? What does it mean for the future? So what would be then the result if we do nothing? So how much people really suffer then from adverse impacts, from natural hazards, for health risks, for social risk in this case? And then we have also one shared reference data, what I said, okay. And in these ones, all this chapter included. And then we have a lot of handshakes, what we call that 2 or perhaps 3 chapters where they have to exchange. Like for chapter 1 and chapter 7, they have to say who is dealing with which kind of natural hazards. How they deal, if in chapter 1 they say temperature change in depending on the evaluation, or does it chapter 7? So that's a lot of things where we have to do, or like what the migration topic. Is the migration topic now in chapter 3, or is it in chapter 6? So that's a lot of discussion, or we had also energy supply, which chapter they do something like that. So that's handshake. So that's a lot of coordination. I want to show you just one topic, what we developed now in the topic hazard risk, where I'm strongly involved. So we changed the risk propeller of the IPCC, because we wanted to show the changes. Your hazard can decrease or increase. The same, it could be done by vulnerability or exposure. And that means that also risk is changing, decreasing or increasing. But you see here the hard limit of adaptation, what we try to find when we can't adapt anymore, where technical measures can't help, or we can't do anything. And what would be, and then we have the soft limitations here, and what is the status quo. And you see here examples, actions influencing exposure, so risk sensitive land use planning, early warning and info system, resettlement could be an option in this case. And we try to find this then for different parts, how they could see. And what we see, we have emission and land use change that gives us here the climate change, impact to environmental change, and that influence the hazards. But also we change here, and then we have a change when a hazard occurs, we have an impact, and this could change. And also the socio-economic process in the risk governance has changes in this case, and all of them feed in then to our risk. And we want that assess the risk in the different chapters, and we have to find now procedure how to do it. So chapter 1 supports this hazard relevant information. So we ask which kind of hazard information each of the chapter needs, and which one chapter 1 can provide, and also can they provide it in the future, and tell us, and in 20 years it's like this, when we have like a global warming of 2 degrees, this means in the meteorological part like this, we have more rain, we have higher temperature, and we ask them also to say it, to show it in different regions, in Austria. So not just one value for Austria, but spatially distributed. And then you see chapter 2, 3, 4, and 7 use this and identify the risks, so the adverse impacts in this case. They have then to assess in a methodology what we developed together, what's the severity and the urgency of this part. And then we want to identify key risks, to say what are the most important key risks in this case. And then we have with chapter 5, 6, and 8 together, we define, and that's a process where we are just working on it, how we want to do it, which information we need, from which chapter, what they have to assess, what they have to provide, say what's representative key risk, and are there also interactions between this key risk. What does it mean when I have a huge flooding? Say flooding is a key risk, and I have a risk also due to droughts for food productions. Is there interactions between that? Or when I have problems, what does it mean when we have huge impacts to natural hazards? In this case, does it mean that we have adverse effects, and does it mean it also have a social risk in this case, and how they interact? Or if we have an increase in poverty, what does it mean when we have huge damage? Is it the same population which has less money, can't cope with these damages, and get additionally these high damages? That's something what we try to find out and to consider in our part. And then that's something what we have to develop. We want to make a synthesis representative of key risk that would be then in the summary of policymakers. But that's only possible when all the chapters use the same criteria, the same methods, the same approach, that we can compare it. And that's just now for one of the cross-cutting topics, and we have several of them. That's the organization, what we do at the background and try to find together. You see here a table for the scenario registration where we collect all kinds of scenarios, which were here in this case energy sector, other sectors, which geographical report they have, from which study do we have it, which data they use, can we compare them? So that's also an effort bringing all this information together. We have a scenario database, the Net Zero 2040 Scenario Explorer, where you see the link, and you can also have a look at this, where you see renewable gas in Austria by 2040, Russian gas exit scenario for Austria, what does it mean? Or edel spirit scenario, that we have green gases in this case. So that's also where we combine data and develop something, and everyone can use this information. What I said already, we identify also research gaps and communicate them to the Klimafonds. That's the Austrian climate research program, where they can include it, where our project is also funded. And we are in a regular contact with them. Then you see for a short selection, what we have identified so far is a concept of a 3.5 versus 2 versus 3 degree warmer world. Can we deduce this for Austria? We don't have the model results in this case. So we develop now, our colleagues develop an approach how we can transfer the information in this information, because it's very important, because a lot of the studies are working in this. What does it mean when we exceeded 1.5 or 2 degree? What does it mean? We have national and regional tipping points, including vulnerability, also including forest in this case, coming from chapter 2, the saying due to the drought and the heat waves, what we have an increase perhaps of beetles and other like forest health problem. And with this, we will increase the wildfire institution, that we come in a situation like we are used perhaps in the Mediterranean, or what we know from Canada now. So, and we have to think about that. what we want to do is also to improve usability of climate scenarios for stakeholders. So that's a part of our stakeholder process. Which kind of information do they need that they can work with it? What's included in there? Then we have also like the impact on infrastructure and built environment. It's not really clear. So there is a lot of research gap. The synergy and trade-off of the SDGs is still a challenging part, and also cost potentials and quantification of sorts and things. And you see that's a lot of our cross-cutting topics. Not one discipline can answer this, and we are working on that. So also, there are no studies at the moment when we miss the 100% renewable electricity target by 2030. Currently, our policymakers work with this scenario, but they don't consider if we miss it, our target, what happened then. So there are no studies in this case. Also, migration to and within Europe is a topic, and also to analyze really the information on school books, teachers' education on climate change. So we are also involved in this case, how we can include this part. You see here the products, it's the same like in the APCC. We will have an introduction, then we have a summary for policymakers, where we have the policy relevant insights, where we want to develop good figures which are understandable and where we can transport our messages. And we have, it's a synthesis of the main headline statements. That's the task of us co-chairs and the coordinating lead authors and some selected authors in this case. And we start now that we are ready in 2025 to draft this. Then the technical summary is more in depth, in this case for each of the chapters, where we have also synthesis figures, where we have boxes of important cost-cutting topics, and that's done by all authors who are in there. And then we have this report for each chapter. We are just discussing how long this should be for the chapters. They can write 35 pages, including the pictures. So they are restricted. They want to write more. We restrict them because we said no one would read it. So it's very difficult to write all these important things in a small manner. And what we look now and what we try to define is that we get another project to get more possibilities what we have in our current project for dissemination and science communication. So we have here listed some ideas, but we are open for further suggestions. What you think, what's important, also what you do. Do we need video summaries for each chapter? Do we need material for education or also for study programs? We think about interactive websites, maps, that we have different websites for different target audience. So for young people, for elderly people, to have it in a simple language written, something like that. But for this, we need a lot of experts to support us to do this, because that's not our expertise in this case. And therefore, we need additional money to really get this done. And it's not clear if we will get this additional money, but we have a lot of ideas. So perhaps you have also further ideas how to do it. So what I want to say, that's also from the synthesis report now from the APCC. The hope is mainstreaming effective equitable climate action now will reduce loss and damages for nature and people. Climate actions provides a lot of cool benefits. We want to show them with the SDGs. And we have multiple feasible effective options are available to reduce the emissions and adapt to human-caused climate change. But what we need is the tried tested options. They are already available, need to be assigned to diverse context. And our assessment report for Austria is exactly to this part. We put this global level down to Austria. What does it mean for Austria? What we can do in Austria, not on a global level, but what we can do and where can we start? But we need to be scaled up and applied then also widely. We do our assessment report in English, that we also can share it with other countries. The first one was in German. That was a very ambitious and well ahead actions of Austria to do it, but we can't really distribute it because everything was in German. For the scientists, our working language is English, but also we can show then and share with colleagues. They're starting now also other countries to do it. Some do it, but in a different way. So what we want to do, be also really ahead and showing we as scientists can contribute, we can do something, we can work together, and be a very good example then also for Europe or for others. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention and listening to it. And if you have questions, I'm very happy to take them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I think there are a lot of questions in the audience, and I don't have questions in the chat at the moment, but are there some questions? Should use the microphone that also the online participants could understand. So an icebreaker question from my side, perhaps. So we have an international audience also from the Aurora University.
Yeah.
So this is a process you described for Austria. Is a similar process or similar organization for national assessment reports in other countries too? Is it similar or comparable?
It's differently. It's organized. There are several states who work and they want to see what's climate change changes. So like in Switzerland, they had one, they make the model and say what's the temperature, the meteorological factors on it. They look then what's the impact on the hydrosphere, and they start now to look at a project more diverse on the impact on the environment and the society. But it's structured in a different way like we do it. So they have one part, they started with the climate models and get all this information. What does it mean for Switzerland? They had it once in 2011, and the new one was 2018. So finished, so they started 2 years earlier. And now they started with the impact. The hydro was then 2 years between. So they have tiered, but they look one sector and then they provide this information, and now they look more impact on environment and part. But it's not so like looking at the possibilities and limitations of adaptation, so mitigation, adaptation. In the UK, they do different parts, so we check this once, but the process is very differently. Like Austria is really, we focus very strongly on the procedure in IPCC. Others do, some parts in this area have different information in this case, but I also being not aware what was very recently in this case. It's undone, but there is a lot of efforts for different countries, but they have to fit the country and their society to work with it.
On the slide number 20, if you could show it again, it was on the costs for avoiding CO2 emissions. And there's different sectors like building sector and others, traffic and so on. And I've seen there's the building sector, and there is for new buildings with high energy efficient performance. And there is a positive cost for avoiding CO2, but I don't, maybe I misunderstood it, but on my opinion, it's a negative. So we earn money by saving energy. So it's it's a win-win situation. We get profit and we reduce CO2. Maybe it's calculated in a different way, but you see a red bar in the building section.
Yeah.
and new construction, and it's in the range of 100 to 200 US dollar per ton CO2 equivalent. And in my opinion, it's energy saving is economically saving. So you have negative cost and negative impact on CO2.
I think it depends which measure they use. That's on a global level now. So you can't perhaps use the information or the idea what we have here in Austria in this case. So I'm not really, I don't know what's exactly in this case, but that's from the working group 3, where they say where we can mitigate. So it depends on the overall CO2 emission per year. And if we invest and make with low energy, or that we need no low energy for our buildings, it depends also where and how often we can do, or for which number of buildings we can do it. Perhaps this is included, but I'm not clear how they really do it. But cost and potential is really difficult, and it depends strongly on the methods, what's the result. But in this case, I really have to look up what's the background in this case. So Kevin could answer it because he was leading this working group, but that's not my field in this case. So I would have to ask my co-chair.
Thank you. What was really interesting, I think also for the students, was this chapter about the knowledge gaps, because that's what we are working in the lesson here on. And you mentioned a lot of interesting topics on knowledge gaps. Is it published always online that the public can read it?
No.
You mentioned it's sent to the ministry.
It's sent to the Klimafonds.
To the Klimafonds, yeah.
So we are in connection with there, and they may include it in the next call.
Yeah, but it would be interesting for the public also. So if the students could read it, it would be fantastic. So it's really.
So we have to think big, because it changed, and in this case it's only a selection what we took from the zero order draft, and now what they developed between. That we regularly ask our chapters and say, what did you define now really as a research gap? What's in this case? I think it's true, but I will take it, and perhaps we can manage that we can publish it. But currently it's like this, that we are not publishing results until the report is finished. So what you can do is to register as reviewer, and then you have to state a confidential assignment that you don't provide this information and you don't use it for everything else. But that's an agreement because it's still under development. So also when we have like key statements or something, we are still in the process of assessing it, and could change because perhaps we didn't have checked all the studies at the moment, or we learned afterwards something more. So that's why we will get, if we do the approval, after approval, we'll get, or we hope that we can publish immediately online, the online version in this case.
Yeah, I understand that there is some review process necessary to be really, really sure, and only publish what is really sure. But you talked about a period of around 3 or 4 years for the whole process, and it's a long period of time.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, there will happen a lot, and there could happen also research, which is necessary to clarify things. So maybe especially the research gaps could be published earlier or faster. That would be helpful.
Yes, I will take this and discuss this with my co-chairs.
Thank you. And other questions? Do you have some here? Microphone, please.
I have a question that you talk about the funding, that you have idea, or your team have idea, but you guys, I mean, you're looking for the funding.
Can you take the mic a little bit, because I don't. Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So are you looking for the government funds or
Yeah.
NGO or any specific area that you are looking for funding from these sectors mostly?
So at the moment, the project, it's like a government fund, but because the Klimafond gets the money from the ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And then there you have this committee and the process where when they select what are the research questions where they make the call for projects. So there is each year a call how to do it, but the funding is directly coming from the public Austria, from the Ministry of Climate Protection in this case. What we do at the moment that we assess the existing research, and in any case, all our authors are researchers, so they have projects next to it from different funders and like this. But for us, for funding this process, we can't go to industry or something like that because that would be biased. So in this case, we want to stay really neutral in that, but it's possible that for certain questions there would be coming other possibilities of funders and include that.
And one more thing that you said in your presentation, that we are suggesting to the, I mean, who is going to implement, or suggesting, not saying that you can do it or you could do it or not doing it. So for this suggestion, your idea is implemented by that people's, or they will give you fund and implement by your team? I mean,
you think for the communication afterwards?
yes.
Yes, that's we will write a proposal and send it to the Klimafond
Mm-hmm.
and say, can you give us the funding for this case, or how we organize this? So that could be included, that the governmental is included in there as well.
Okay.
And then if we have get the funding, then we can employ other people to support us. So what we do is writing usually a concept to say, that's the idea, that's what we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a way that you fund or not? We have a certain amount for communication, but thinking about that, it's very important, and the effect would be much better if we have a good communication part. Then it's very good. But Melanie is sitting here. She's from our public relation at university, and she supports us really strongly to get this pushed. Also, what university can do, and also it's the same with all our other partners, that we have support from university, from the public relation, how we can communicate, what we can do in this case, and also develop this concept, how we can climate science communication with the public. But it's, in our sense, very important, and we work there that also the government and the Klimafond are aware that they invested a lot of money now, and also we as scientists invest a lot of time to develop the assessment report, and that we get a good impact. We need this communication part.
Yeah, that's great. And sorry, last thing that I don't know is related or not, but you used a lot of real database. So my question is it the data is from the, I mean, fields, or you are collecting from, say, multiple organizations' data? I mean, primary data or secondary data?
So what
for your research?
So what we do is only using published data. So it's already published from different scientists. So it's not. So we try to organize also primary data, but we don't do certain research now. We do only assess existing research results and do it. What a lot of our authors like to start a research project exactly on that, because we don't have information on this, and we try to do this parallel. A lot of this case to include it, but what we do with the data, what I mentioned, like the emissions, we use an existing database, and we have a discussion with our authors and say, okay, that's our reference database now. We know there are different ones, but due to different criteria, we use now this one. Then we have the common base for all the chapters. So that's not that we're producing new things, we're collecting things and we evaluate them.
Thank you so much. It's really an informative presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much for your questions.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think although this lesson is part of research communication, so you will be for sure invited if the report is out and it's published. So, and maybe also the Seeker Chronicles game would be a way for science communication. So the climate protection will be part of the card game, so it will be growing and growing. Maybe that's a good way to communicate also. So thank you to all the students continuing working on it, and hope you will have fun about doing that.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I hope it gives you some insights what we are doing in the background. It's not very obvious for the students when we do some efforts like that. And thank you for the opportunity to share our process now here.
Yeah, so it's so interdisciplinary, and I think all the students are from completely different subjects. So maybe they have interest in future to collaborate from their part of science to come into communication in this. And you already can inscribe, as you mentioned, and work already in this, to participate in this work. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I think if I look on the chat, if there are some questions. I don't think so. There's no. There's one. One more question. Yeah. Armin, could you open your mic, please?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you clearly.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the great talk. Very interesting. It seems very work-intensive, actually. I'm coming from the computer science point of view, and I was wondering, because you were talking about how to make all of this information that you collect more accessible for different organizations, if this might be also a potential research area to have like more systems or databases where this information becomes more accessible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's very important. I showed one of the, that was before, from our partners from IASA, the Scenario Explorer. They work a lot in this case, especially to make it available, to bring all the information together. And most of the things are really open, where you can download the information, where you can work, and you ask them to upload your results afterwards as well. So I think that's a very good way, and they do it also on an international level. So they're strongly involved in APCC, and also like in the UN government and Europe government in this case, to provide this information, because we need the data. And we try also, when we are now at the moment restricted and not sharing all our thoughts, except you register for the review. But afterwards, when we are finished, then everything is open, and we hope that it's widely used. But due to the process, it's also during the IPCC, we have the strict confidence. But one of the side products is that we have like this Scenario Explorer, that we collect different scenarios, put them at the database, provide the links, also that we have a platform for sharing that. So that's one of the parts, and I think your idea is very important that we go further on in this case. Yeah.
Yeah, was your question answered? It's okay?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I think the scenario manager or the scenario explorer is really an important tool, and to show what will happen if you act in this way or that way, but also if you don't act, what
Yep.
will happen if you do nothing? And that's for the politicians a really important message and really useful. Yeah. Any other questions from the audience? In the chat, there's no. Okay, then I would say thank you very much for all of you. Thank you very much, Margreth, for coming, and yeah, see you next time. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.